hello everybody and welcome. My name is Dominic Troulet, and today we will be discussing Blockbuster's failed acquisition of Netflix. Now before we get into it, let me give you a little bit of background information regarding this failed acquisition. So back in 2000, Netflix was just in its beginning stages as a company. Netflix was in financial troubles and they continued to reach out to Blockbuster for help. The plan in this reaching out was for Blockbuster to run the brick and mortar and for Netflix to run the online web store. Blockbuster, which went out of business in 2013, could have acquired Netflix for $50 million, and it's now worth $157 billion. We will analyze the infamous decision of Blockbuster to turn down the acquisition of Netflix, as well as the set of decisions that led to its eventual demise. On top of this, our goal is to transport ourselves to the exact moment Blockbuster is laughing at Netflix and completely dismissing them as a competitor. So next, let's get into the company vision. In the company vision, is incredibly clear. Well, first of all, the company vision is a declaration of an organization's objectives intended to guide internal decision making. So, at the time, Blockbuster was in the process of actually reimagining their vision as a convenience store. The idea behind this being to fill in the gaps and become that one-stop shop for entertainment that they'd always imagined themselves as. Always looking for growth opportunities as the entertainment leader of their time, they felt incredibly confident that they could turn into this one-stop shop. And as a result, while they saw themselves as simply a movie rental store, they were in the process of actually missing out on a digital revolution within their industry. Retail focus is why they missed out on this digital revolution, but we'll get to that a bit later. Next, let's talk about the leadership structure which led to this bad decision. So, as you can tell, undergoing structural leadership changes around the time of the decision and the years after, this led to their failure. But they followed the classic corporate structure of a chairman and CEO with 4 direct reports before and during the decision. These 4 direct reports fell into categories of financial, operational, communications, and strategic planning. While this does sound like it encapsulates all aspects of the business, we must realize that with each of these 4 labels encapsulating different parts of the business, the only communication that was possible came from these 4 direct reports. And so if you think about all the people in a nationwide chain such as Blockbuster that had to get that information up to these direct reports, it's no surprise the digital revolution was missed, and it seems that the leadership structure may have been at fault. Next, let's talk about the culture that may have led to this. Now, Blockbuster had a very, very tight corporate structure, as I mentioned, with only 4 outlets for management to speak besides the CEO and chairman. On top of this, they did not feel that they were addressing the internet revolution, or they could be heard in terms of the internet revolution, which was coming to the industry. This was a problem, and a first-hand comment from former employee Jonathan Baskin explains this very well, saying, "The problem with this strategy is that it never acknowledged, let alone addressed, the fundamental promise and peril of this business. If people didn't come to find movies they wish they hadn't missed in theaters, no amount of out-on retailing could replace that once glorious rental income." So, that is the strategic background information and the State of the Union regarding this decision. Next, I'm going to pass it off to my teammate to discuss biases.
Hi, I'm Naoto. I'm going to talk about some of the biases that Blockbuster faced in its acquisition deal. So our first bias was the representativeness heuristic. This bias describes the fact that Blockbuster looked at Netflix as an old model because the prior heuristic and the prior prototype for a successful digital entertainment company was retail-based. So in their mind, a movie rental business was really retail-based because that's all that they had known in Blockbuster's life as a company. So as a result, they thought Netflix's proposal of the digital acquisition was a failed strategy. So this also led them to consider many other digital companies that they were potentially looking at and turn them down because they didn't think that digital was going to be the next wave of online streaming and movie rental. So our next bias is bounded awareness. So Blockbuster really had a strong focus on retail, and they were really unaware of the internet. They really had blinders on, which caused them to completely neglect the fact that the industry was really going digital and was really going online. So this was really proved by the fact that they really tinkered around their retail strategy, especially with late fees, because they're trying to refine the retail experience instead of looking at other potential strategies that could work. Our next bias is the escalation of commitment. So they really invested a lot of money into their retail stores. They tried to add food, drinks, and other features to make the retail stores more pleasant to the consumer instead of potentially considering other strategies that might be better for the company in the long term. So at this point, because they invested so much money, they felt that they really had no other choice other than to keep focusing and keep working on retail, which really led them to overcommit to retail, which demonstrates the fact that this was an escalation of commitment. Our next bias is availability heuristic. So it's really important to understand that at the point that the CEO was considering a potential acquisition of Netflix, this was right after the dot-com bubble. So this was a really vivid and recent event for Blockbuster because a lot of people lost millions of dollars in failed internet startups. So from the point of view of an industry that just collapsed with the internet, lots of internet companies failing, they thought Netflix was just going to be another company that would go bankrupt. So this really illustrates the fact that vividness and recency is a huge bias that many people face. Finally, we have loss aversion. So this relates to the fact that Blockbuster really considered the riskiness of internet startups as opposed to the potential revenue upside of going digital. So this really demonstrates the fact that a lot of big established companies like Blockbuster are really averse to risk. And this opens the floodgate for startups to come and take their market share. So finally, we're going to talk about some of the recommendations that Blockbuster could have implemented to prevent these biases.
Hello, my name is Matthew Edgar, and I'm going to be going over the 3 recommendations that would have helped Blockbuster's CEO not be influenced by the biases Naoto just went over. So the first recommendation is that the CEO should have looked at the acquisition of Netflix with an allocentric viewpoint instead of an egocentric viewpoint. Throughout the whole process, he was acting selfishly, and because of this, it basically didn't allow effective communication and transparency along the upper management. In addition, the CEO's egocentric viewpoint allowed other biases such as overconfidence, bounded awareness, availability heuristics to basically come in and support his incorrect view. If the CEO showed empathy, he would have been able to take a step back and put himself in the shoes of others. I know this seems very simple, but it's actually one of the most difficult things for humans to do. And if the CEO actually was able to do this, he would have listened to his employees, which leads me to the next recommendation. So the next recommendation is inquiry orientation, and the CEO would have greatly benefited by doing this, but instead he took an advocacy approach. And so advocacy orientation is not a friendly conversation at all. It's a complete power struggle where basically I'm trying to win the conversation, not arrive at the best solution. So by using an inquiry orientation, he would have involved his other workers and they would have came to the best solution together. This reminds us a lot about the 1986 Challenger case we went over in class, where basically an advocacy orientation caused a person to make a huge decision alone rather in a group. The next recommendation I want to go over is the last one, and it's value-focused thinking. We believe the CEO should have basically used value-focused thinking approach instead of a binary approach. When he was evaluating whether or not to acquire Netflix, he looked at it as Netflix versus Blockbuster. And so in his mind, it was a no-brainer because Netflix was bleeding money and very small, so there was no threat to Blockbuster. The problem was that Blockbuster had a business plan that was not sustainable for the future. They had no competitive advantage. They literally just sold movies in a store, and 16% of their profits came from late fees. So we were hoping that the CEO could use this overarching thinking to truly understand what the customers wanted. And if he would have done this, they would have understood that the customers didn't care about the physical location. They didn't care about going to the store and picking out the movies. That was actually a hindrance. They would have understood that the more convenient you can make it to get the movies, the better it is. And so online streaming is actually going to have a big effect in the future. And so we believe that if the CEO used the value-focused approach, they would have either acquired Netflix right away, or they would have built up their own online streaming system quick enough to save the company. And that concludes the presentation and the 3 recommendations. We hope Hope you learned something new, and thank you for your time. I had more to say.